I'm going to just give you a crash course, like real quick, on just what does science say, just because there's so much information out there. But I don't want to take too much time because really what I want you to hear is, okay, what do we do about this, right? We told you a whole bunch of context today, but what do I do about it? I have people in my life. I have people I work with. I have the person at the Starbucks drive-thru. I have my child. I have my own challenges. And we'll pretty much spend the rest of the day talking about that. But I'm going to take just a few minutes and tell you, okay, what's some truth about science that you probably have not been told? You've been told something else. But I do need to click I've got myself a little bit goofed up here, so hang on just a second. Cue the Jeopardy music. Sorry. Still don't have it right. I'm sorry. Okay. So, a few things that you, just to point out, if you can go to the slide that says, God says no because. So this is kind of the heavier talk. Like, I don't even love sharing this stuff because it's hard to hear. Like, there's some truths about homosexual life that if you could take this information and you could go out and share it with somebody and really wound them. Because there are dangers, there are, associated, but, all I'm going to say is just really, I want to encourage you to really be sensitive to, when do we share certain truth, right? Like, you don't share certain things with your children when they're 3 that you would share with them when they're 20. And, when someone has just lost a loved one, you don't come and tell them necessarily bits of truth even in that moment because it's not the right time, right? And this person's grieving or they're in a certain place in life. So just be aware with this. But basically, Elizabeth talked to you about what the Bible says about who we are, sexuality and relationships and homosexuality and all that. Well, God does not say no to homosexuality because he's a killjoy. He says no because he wants us to thrive. He wants what's best for us. And, a sex act is designed to be, that most intimate thing that somebody can do is designed to directly create life. Like, does God put pleasure in it for our pleasure? I believe he did. But also, it's in a context of that creates life, and that doesn't happen when you have 2 men together or 2 women together. It is impossible for life to flow out of that, and that's the context that family happens in, right? So, out of the most intimate experience that 2 people can have, out pops a life, and in the context of a loving family, where you have God's perfect order of a father and a mother able to care for this fruit of their love forever. Like, the beauty of that design, you don't have that with an LGBTQ setup. And I think that's extremely important, right? Next slide. This is what's so sad. I don't even like sharing this because it's, if you go and you just say this to somebody, it's like you're gonna wound them. But these are the realities. I mean, this is for men who have sex with men, MSM. Look at all of the high incidence of these painful experiences of life: mood disorders, panic disorders, bipolar, OCD, alcohol dependence, drug dependence. All of them are significantly higher in a relationship with where men are having sex with men. Self-harm, you're getting it, right? Like this is not a route to thriving. Like if you go to some of the prominent organizations that serve the LGBT community, they will tell you kind of as you're entering their world, you need to be aware of all of these potential problems that can coincide with homosexual sexual behavior. Fortunately, the way God set it up between a man and a woman for life is there's no physical or emotional, mental trauma that happens there. You see what I'm saying? It works with a man, with a woman. The incidence of cancers and STDs is much, much higher, particularly for men having sex with men. A CDC study indicated that men who have sex with men are 44 times more likely to have an HIV diagnosis. 44 times. For men, the lifespan drops by, you won't believe how many years the average lifespan drops. 20 years. It's not a recipe for thriving. And did you know that those who are confused about their gender and who even complete a sex reassignment surgery, so a man having all the surgeries to identify biologically as a woman, is still 19 times more likely to complete a suicide than the average person. And the rate of suicide goes up after the surgery than down. It is not a solution. Next slide. So I want to just say a little bit about some basics of science. So sex is not determined by what a doctor assigned me at birth or by how I look or anything. Like it is, if you want to know what sex someone is, it's in their chromosomes. So did you know that you have literally trillions of cells in your own body that are encoded as either male or female? You cannot change someone's sex. It's impossible. There are trillions of cells encoded as male or female just in one body. They're very, very rare chromosomal abnormalities, but again, there are people born with one arm. There are people born with different, genetic defects and all that. That doesn't create a third sex. That doesn't create a different type of person. We're still either a male or a female. Doctors, scientists are still going to be able to say, oh, even if there is some kind of a genetic abnormality or something like that, you still can determine that they are male or female chromosomally. Did you know that women soccer players, like Olympic soccer players, if they're female, they will be watching for where the woman is in her monthly cycle and not play her at certain points of time in that cycle because her ligaments will be looser and things like that, and she's more likely to get injured at that point in her cycle. Like, men and women are different biologically. Next slide. And I'll just point this out and then move on. But culture has been awash in a whole lot of misinformation for many years about, there's a gay gene, or the gay brain study, or something. The brains of people that are gay look a little different, and then there's a ton of fraud in a bunch of studies, and then you've got the media hooked up to it and is touting. So there are studies that have been recalled and said, no, this was, but that doesn't make it into the media. So you'll never know that study was recalled, okay? So the gay brain study looked at, sure enough, there's this part of the brain of some people that were identified as gay is larger. Well, they didn't look at the brains of those people when they were babies. So if you give yourself to a way of thinking and behaving for years and years, it affects your brain. So could their brain have been a little bit larger? Sure, because that's how they behaved and who they were. It doesn't mean they were designed that way. So there's biases and wrong reporting of information out there. But in 2019, they completed a 30-year longitudinal study. It is a gold standard study, the top, as far as types of scientific study done, Yale, Harvard, MIT scientists coming together. And they looked at all of the genetics of almost 500,000 people across 3 different countries, simply looking for, is there a gay gene? That was the whole point of the study. That study came back conclusively, no, there is no gay gene, okay? Now it did report that there is some very small heritability associated with sexual or feelings, homosexual feelings, but that's true of almost anything that you would study. So, let me just bring it to home. If we're going to say that someone was born gay, then the next time you see someone smoking a cigarette, you need to know that they were born a cigarette smoker. There is a higher heritability attached to cigarette smoking than there is to having homosexual feelings. Same thing with divorce. If anybody has been divorced, you were actually born a divorcee. That's the level of genetic influence we're talking about. You get it? So what the study did conclusively prove that what is the preponderance of what is behind sexual feelings is environment. They proved that scientifically with that study. It's where you grew up. It's what your family dynamic was. It was what religion you're a part of. All of these different factors in people's lives played all these small parts of propping them up, whether how assertive a boy was or was less assertive. Things like all those played these tiny little pieces of maybe creating a predisposition to possibly head that way. That's the stuff, which that's what we're telling you. It's like the stuff that happens to us, how our family responds, whether I fit in with the other boys, how I got along with my dad, if my mom was abusive, all these things. Did I have a faith that told me my identity versus something? All those play a part. So, is that helpful? That's your crash course on science. Okay. All right. So we're going to shift gears, and now you get to hear from Caleb Boggan, our director of pastoral care, and he's going to tell you, what do I do about all this? I got people in my life. What do I do? So y'all give Caleb a hand.
Awesome. Well, it's good to be with all of you today.
Take your whole time. We'll figure it out.
Okay. We're a little behind today, in case you didn't catch on to that. So I am going to, now that you're all depressed, because Ken just shared all of the really heavy things out there that are actually it's really important information for us to know. I'm going to attempt to give you a little hope. And we're going to look at how do we walk with people who are navigating this experience. What should you say? What shouldn't you say? What are some practical things that we can do to walk with people? And I do have a paper that we printed off, I believe. So I think that's somewhere. We're not going to be looking at that paper during this session, but I wanted you guys to have some of this written down so that you don't have to frantically take notes, because I'm not going to do slides so that you can actually hear what I'm saying versus having to take notes the whole time. And so there is a paper. Oh, great, we've got it. Right, so the paper will be in the back. Grab it on your way out. It's got some practical information that you'll want. So before I jump into all of that, I'm going to give you the briefest version of my story you've probably ever heard. So the thing you need to know is that I was raised in a Christian home, and I loved the Lord for as long as I can remember. From a time that I was a small child, I remember having conversations with the Lord, even before I officially gave my life to the Lord at 5. Around that same time is when I was molested by some older neighbor boys and didn't know how to process that, and an adult wasn't aware to help me process that. I was called gay for the first time in 3rd grade because I like Disney, glitter, and Broadway, and I didn't fit in with all of the rough and tumble guys that were in my life at the time. Noticed same-sex attraction exclusively by the time I made it to puberty. Had zero attraction to women at all, and didn't know what to do with that. Shoved that down as deep as I could get it, and spent my time just taking care of everybody else's needs and never dealing with my own. Skipping through lots of things. In a last-ditch effort, I ran away to Youth with a Mission, or YWAM, thinking if I can just spend some time serving the Lord, maybe somehow my life will make sense and this won't be this overwhelming thing I have to deal with. But I did what I always did, which was to take care of everybody else and not deal with my own heart. And so at the end of my first year on staff with YWAM, I was burnt out, a little bitter, and I found myself in a codependent sexual relationship with another boy that I never wanted, another guy a little bit older than me. And yet it met a need that I had, and I didn't know how to get out. But the Lord, in his kindness, separated us by way of a move. I ended up back in YWAM, and the Lord said, you have to tell your leaders everything that you've done. And I thought, that's not going to go well. I'm going to be asked to leave. I'm going to be told to never come back, because all I've experienced with the church is that this is the topic, that you're going to hell, and that's the only thing people say. So I was not convinced that was going to be a good idea. And really, to even voice this, if I get sent away, I'm not sure I'm going to live through that experience, because I finally found people that I love and that I care about. And if I lose this, I lose my entire community. I lose everything I have, is how I felt with that decision. So it took me 6 months to have that conversation with my leader. And I went into it shaking and terrified. And then he responded so well. And he said 3 things to me. And this is, if you take away nothing else from this session, this is important. His response to me was, first off, I forgive you, which I didn't realize I needed to hear. I believed God forgave me. I was not about to forgive myself, and I was convinced people couldn't forgive me. So I actually needed to hear that one. Hey, you're forgiven. The second thing he said to me is, my opinion of you has gone up, not down, because I know how hard it was for you to come and have this conversation with me. And I thought, that's strange. And then the third thing he said is, we're going to figure it out together. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't alone in that journey. I had been doing this by myself easily for 7 years at that point, and hadn't told anybody. Nobody had stepped in to walk with me on that journey. And I thought, surely this man is going to start to distance himself from me now that he knows. And instead, he came closer. He'd come up to me and give me a hug and ask how my day was, not to check up on me and make sure I wasn't getting into trouble, although he was aware of all of those dynamics too, but mostly because he cared about me and he wanted to know, how are you doing? What's going on in your life? He chose to be a part of my life, and I became part of his family. He and his wife walked with me for the next 8 years, and I stayed at that YWAM base for all of that time, because where I felt like the disciples, where else am I going to go? You have the words of life, I've experienced something so significant. Why would I leave that now? All because one man responded well. Because he said, you know what? I'm not afraid of this. They had no idea what they were doing, but they believed Jesus could meet me in my journey, and they provided space for me to encounter the Lord within the context of safe community, which is what all of you are about to start creating. And so much has changed. I'll share a couple of specific pieces of my story as we go through some of the content here. But the end goal is, at this point right now, so much has shifted in my life. I went from only experiencing attraction to men to rarely experiencing attraction to men, and experiencing opposite sex attraction. And I totally have faith and hope to meet a woman, get married, start a family of my own. That's something that's exciting to me. That's a possibility in my life, versus where I was, even 10 years ago. Very different place. So, jumping into some content. Most of what I'm going to say is going to be on that paper. So if I'm going really fast, don't panic. But I want to say the core desire of someone navigating LGBT is this. It's to be fully known, accepted, valued, and loved for who they are. which if you missed that, that's a human desire. It's not unique or special for an LGBT person. Everybody on the planet wants to feel known, valued, accepted, and loved for who they are right now, not who they used to be, not who they could be. Right now, do you love me? Do you know me for who I am? The second thing I want to say that's a really key thing for us to be aware of is that relational equity is key for influence. There's the phrase, people don't care what you know till they know that you care. If we don't have relationship with people, then whatever you say to them is really not going to land and stick without the relational equity. Now, that's not to say that if Jesus doesn't tell you to go talk to some stranger and share with them that you shouldn't, you should absolutely follow his leading all the time. That's rule number 3. Always do what Jesus says. And by rule 3, I mean really rule number 1. So Ken and Jess both mentioned this already, but this is an intimacy issue. And so how do we heal that? We heal that with intimacy, relationship. Relationships heal us just like relationships wound us. So with that, what are what I call some failed first responses? So these are the things not to say or do when someone shares with you that they're struggling. These are all things I either have heard myself or friends of mine have had people respond to them in this way. And so these are the ones to avoid, and then we'll get into how do you respond, and I'll give you some practical things there too. So the first one is just, we don't want to ever assume that their relationship with the Lord must be struggling, or that they're some rebellious person trying to live out of obedience to the Lord, or telling them, hey, you just need to go pray about that. My relationship with the Lord was actually really strong because my struggle drove me deeper into the heart of Jesus, not further from him. Now, there were some areas of immaturity in my life. I had to grow in some different things. But if someone assumed that my relationship with the Lord was struggling just because of my struggle with sexuality, I immediately said, you don't know me. You have no idea what's going on in my life. And I actually feel judged by you now. So why am I going to keep interacting with you? Don't assume that their relationship with the Lord is struggling, because it may not be. Some of the people I know who are struggling with this issue are actually closer to the Lord than most of the people in our churches, because they go, Jesus, I need you, help. And telling them that they just need to go pray about it is kind of dismissive. It says, hey, I don't actually want to talk to you about this. You and Jesus just need to go figure that out in some back corner, and don't talk to me again until you're fully free, is what that message says. So avoid that one. Another one that we want to avoid is telling them that they just have a demon. This is the one that the church has actually probably done the most damage with. Is we come in and we go, we're going to pray this demon off of you, the demon of homosexuality. It's going to leave you and you're going to be set free. And then we pray for them and they're not set free. And we go, well, either you didn't want to be free or something else is broken. And so what do? Now, if you've prayed for demons to leave people in the realm of sexuality, no judgment. We're all learning and growing. But the reality is that it is a very complicated experience. Jess went over a bunch of the different things that could be factors in how a person's sexuality is impacted. And so we don't want to simplify the issue to it's just a demon, and we're going to pray for you and you're going to get set free for several reasons. One, it probably isn't just a demon. There might be a demon, and we should absolutely spend some time asking God to bind and get rid of anything in our lives that is not from him. But there are a lot of other factors that go into this that need some healing as well. There's some deep wounding there that's going to need some healing, and casting a demon out may not result in radical transformation in that moment. Ken talks about having deliverance sessions and feeling something leave, and then an hour later he's attracted to the man who just delivered him. It's not always as simple as we cast a demon out and you're good to go. So pray, ask God to get rid of stuff. But we don't want to just simplify it to you have a demon and this is going to go away, partly because we can't guarantee that someone's sexuality is going to change after one prayer time. And it kind of communicates, hey, there's something wrong with you if it didn't work. I know what I'm able to do, and I can get you healed and whole in a moment, but clearly you didn't want it, is the message that we start to receive. Or we go, oh, there's nothing I can actually do about it, because even the prayer minister was unsuccessful at getting me set free. So let's be careful with that one. Again, there's probably some demonic stuff involved, just like everything that we struggle with that's a sin issue in our life. There's probably some demonic influence, but don't hang out just with it's a demon, and don't lead with that, would be my recommendation. Another one is telling them that it's just their thorn in their flesh and that they're going to struggle with this for the rest of their life. I have heard this one, and it is a hopeless response. This message says either God can't or he won't engage with your brokenness. And if that's who God is, why would I serve him? Is Jesus actually able to fully redeem and restore everything or not? We see in John 10:10, it says that Jesus says, I came to give life and life abundantly. Life abundantly doesn't look like struggling with something for the rest of your life. That's not life abundantly. That's survival. That's not who Jesus is. And since we see in Scripture and in science that God didn't create people to experience LGBT, then he has solutions for those experiences. And so that response tends to communicate a lot of hopelessness, and I believe actually breeds offense towards the Lord. Because again, either he can't or he won't engage with my struggle. Another one is telling them that they just need to go date the opposite sex. Please don't do this. I personally know several people who have done a lot of damage because of this. I know a ministry leader who left his wife and kids after about 20 years of marriage, blew his whole family apart because he never actually healed the root issue. So he's putting on this face and everything's great, and he hasn't really dealt with what's really going on underneath the surface, and he should never have been in a relationship to begin with if he hadn't gotten that healing. This will either cause lots of damage down the road, so 20 years later somebody leaves their wife and kids because they didn't deal with it, or it'll solidify, I must be gay right now because I tried to date this woman and it didn't work. I still felt attracted to men, and I never could have those kinds of feelings towards the girl that I'm dating, and so it just further proves I must be gay. So please don't encourage people to go date the opposite sex unless they're at a point in their healing where that is actually a good option. The Lord has already healed a bunch of things. They're walking in tons of victory and breakthrough. Their experience with LGBT is diminished substantially. Then by all means, if it's ready, if it's time and the Lord is prompting you to encourage people that direction, do it. Don't share their struggle with anyone that you haven't asked permission to share with, and definitely not with anyone who isn't going to be part of the solution. Somebody who's going to be walking with the individual, those are the people that need to be brought in, but we still need permission from them to share. This is a very deeply personal and vulnerable experience to have. And oftentimes it feels like we don't have control over our story. And so we need to actually make sure they stay in the driver's seat with their story. Are they ready to have a conversation with another person? But sometimes this is a more subtle one in the church. We go, I'm going to go tell this person over here because they need to be aware so they can be watching for stuff over here. And then I'm going to have a conversation with this person over here so they can be watching. And pretty soon our whole congregation knows about this person's struggle, and the person knows everyone's talking about me, but no one's talking to me. They feel isolated. They leave the church. They may not go back to another church again. So they actually get kind of pushed out because we shared with a lot more people than needed to be brought into the conversation. So who's going to be helpful in walking with the person, and is the person okay with us bringing them into that journey? Those are important things. Another one, treating them as if they're unsafe or can't be trusted around the same-sex children or you. So this one comes from the belief that because they're attracted to the same sex, they must be a sex addict who will take any opportunity to come on to you or abuse your children. And that is not often the case. Especially with the amount of abuse that this particular experience comes with. Some of the people I know who are navigating this are actually the very people I want working with children, because they're aware of the signs of abuse. And so they're actually going to be looking out for your kids better than other people. Now, that doesn't mean you should just throw them into working with children. If they're ready for it, are they a safe person? We need some different systems and protocols in place to make sure that we're only pulling in safe people to work with our children. But assuming that they're going to be unsafe with children or unsafe with you is not an accurate representation of all LGBT people or their experience. And chances are you're not their type. So relax a little bit. Their attraction works the same way yours does. They're not attracted to everybody, so you're probably safe. If there's some cause for concern, have a conversation, it'll be fine. Another one here is don't assume that a dorm or a locker room setting is going to be a really difficult or triggering experience for someone. I had a student years ago who was living in a dorm setting and was struggling with same-sex attraction. And I happened to know that the guys that he was living in this dorm with all ran around in their underwear whenever they were home. And I thought, I wonder how that is. And so I sat down with him, and I didn't assume anything, but I just asked a question. Hey, I know this is a dynamic in the house. How has that been for you? And his response surprised me. His response was, this has been such a healing experience for me. They all know my story, and I feel like none of them are afraid of me. I'm treated like one of the guys. It was this healing experience for him, which was good, because then I didn't have to have any uncomfortable conversations with my staff or other students. But if we jump to that, assuming this is going to be a bad thing place, we can mess some things up. Another one is we don't want to only focus on the issue of sexuality instead of focusing on discipling the whole person. If we're focused only on sexuality, our focus is on me and my brokenness, and not me learning what it means to be a disciple or a son of Jesus, and what does it look like for me to follow him. We get out of balance, and then we get out of sync with what the Holy Spirit's doing. I wasted years of my journey focusing only on my sexuality and not focusing on what does it look like to follow Jesus. Don't do that. Another one is we don't want to overwhelm them with a list of all the things that they need to do or change in their life based on how we feel. If it's an issue of sin, like, okay, great, you're a believer. Here's what believers don't do. We're not hooking up with people. That is sin. That's one of those things that we can draw a harder line with. Be gracious in that place, because old habits die hard, and they're going to need to be walked with closely in that process. But sometimes we come in and we go, here's all the stuff you have to change now. And we overwhelm them with all the things that they have to change, and they eject from the process because it's too much. So we see this often with a guy who has some more effeminate mannerisms or interests, or women who have some more masculine interests or traits. We come in and we go, all right, you got to stop talking like this. You got to change the way you dress. You got to stop being interested in this thing. And suddenly they're like, I can't do that, because I can't pretend to be one of the masculine guys over here who likes sports and grunting and breaking things. That's not who I am, and that's not who I will ever be. And the other risk with this one is if we're not careful, we'll actually cut off something that Jesus put there. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that later, but some of these people are actually called to be that level of creative, or like Jess, recruited for Division I softball. She had a gift on her life that if somebody had come in and said, oh, nope, you can't like sports anymore because you're a woman, suddenly something that she's actually designed to do is being taken away, and that's a hopeless place to live as well. So don't do those things. And then I just want to say this too. I think Jess already mentioned this, but attraction isn't sin. What we do with attraction is what determines sin. Did I partner with lust? Did I lean into that more than I should have? That's the determining factor in all of this. And so sometimes that gets confusing, even for us as we're walking that out. When I would notice an attractive guy, I pretty consistently would go, oh God, forgive me. I take that thought captive. But half the time I hadn't actually lusted after this guy. It was just, I just noticed an attractive guy walked in the door. So help people figure that out. So how do we respond when someone is sharing with us, hey, I'm struggling with my sexuality? how should we respond? We know what not to say now. And this information will be on that sheet. So if this goes quick, it's going to be okay. First step is check your face. Some of us have more expressive faces than others, and that is okay. But if your face looks shocked or surprised or uncomfortable, they're going to go, oh, I was too much. I can't have this conversation with this person anymore. So, check your face. Put on your pastor face is what one of my friends says. We want a kind response, a kind face, an empathetic face in that space. And if your face does do something that you don't mean for it to do, just clean up the mess. Have a conversation and say, hey, when you shared this with me, I think my face may have accidentally said something I didn't mean for it to say, and I want you to know I'm not uncomfortable with this conversation. So I want to keep hearing how you're doing. Let's talk some more. Clean up the mess if your face does something it shouldn't. But check your faces first. The second one is we want to engage with empathy and honor their courage. So that can look like, oh, wow, thank you so much for sharing this with me. I know that must have taken a lot of courage for you to come and share this deep part of your heart with me. I'm really honored by that. And tell me more about your experience. What was that like for you? It sounds like you may have been really alone in that journey. What was that like? I'm so sorry. Engage with some empathy. And the reason for this is empathy is really helpful for two reasons. One, empathy builds relational connection, which we need the relational equity in order to have hard conversations later. So it builds some relational connection there. The other thing it does is it gives you more information. Some people come and share with you their experience, and it's hard to tell, are you saying you've embraced this identity, or are you saying, I need help? And that's important information for me to know, because how I respond is going to change depending on where you're at. And so if we're not sure, empathy, asking more questions about their experience is actually going to give us the information we need to do that well. From there, we want to encourage the truth of their unique identity. And so what I mean by that is when someone's sharing with me, I start going, God, give me one thing about their identity that I can encourage today. Something you put there that's going to help them feel seen and valued. And as often as I can, I try to connect that to masculinity or femininity. Now, if they're sharing with me they're embracing a transgender identity, I'm not going to connect it to masculinity or femininity because I don't want to cut the relationship off right there. But that can look like, I've had several guys that I've been walking with, and I just feel like the Lord's like, you are such a kind and compassionate man. You love people so well. I love how God made you that way. It's a beautiful expression of your masculinity. What's a way that I can encourage the truth of who they are, communicate Jesus sees them like that, and it's a good thing. But encourage their unique identity. Try to avoid vague things that you could say to anybody, but what's the thing that's specific to them? And how do I connect that to their masculinity or their femininity to encourage that they're enough? From there, we want to make sure we assure them that nothing's going to change in our relationship and that we're not going to walk away, but that we're going to walk with them in that journey. So just like my spiritual dad said, we're going to figure it out together. I'm not going anywhere. And you may have to prove that a couple times. Text them and follow up, find them and chase them down, because we're going to kind of assume you're going to start to distance yourself. Which comes to the next point, which is increase intentionality moving forward. Shoot them a text the same day or the next day. Hey, you shared some really vulnerable things with me. How are you doing? Just wanted you to know I'm thinking about you. Would love to talk again soon. Let me know what you need. Increase your intentionality. From this point, so that's how I would respond, the first half of how I would respond to literally anyone. So whether they've embraced that identity or they're choosing to walk with the Lord, that's how I'm going to start. So if they are wanting help and resources, then there are a few other things that I'll do. And the first one is just give them hope. Share a testimony from your own life. What was an impossible situation that you experienced that Jesus met you in and brought full freedom in that realm? Point them to the Changed website. Here are a bunch of testimonies. You found peace and fulfillment and joy walking with Jesus. It's possible. You can do that. Give them some hope. Ask God to lead you and follow his guidance. Do what Jesus says every time. Ask them how you can partner with them on this journey. What are you needing? What are you hoping for? If they don't know, hey, I want to connect with you regularly and be intentional with walking with you. Or, hey, I want to help connect you with someone who can walk with you more regularly. Sometimes we don't have the capacity. That's okay. Just explain what season you're in. Hey, I'm real busy in this season, and I want to make sure that you get the care that you deserve and that I want to give you, but I may not have the time to do that. So is it okay if we pull in this person who has that kind of capacity and can meet with you regularly to make sure you're getting taken care of? But ask them how you can partner with them. Pray for them often. We need it all the time. Okay, so then for somebody who's not wanting out of LGBT, they've embraced this identity, we're going to respond a little bit differently. So a couple things to remember relational equity is key for influence. It's important. The other thing that we need to know is that if we don't find the correct balance between truth and love, we're likely going to lose the relationship anyway. And we're going to lose any access to the person's life in the long haul. So overemphasizing truth is going to cause them to feel judged and condemned, so why would I keep you in my life? Overemphasizing love can also cause damage because we'll go years down the road and you'll find yourself in a situation where you have to speak the truth, and then they feel devastated. You've been lying to me for however many years. All this time I thought you were my friend, but no, you've been lying to me. So we have to find the balance there with the truth and the love. We want to be truthful and honest with our beliefs, but still ensure that they deeply experience our love and compassion. So some of how I do that. Again, we can do all the same things we talked about before with checking our face, engaging with empathy, encouraging their identity, telling them we're not going anywhere, all of those things. Here's roughly how I would respond to someone. So again, I'm going to thank them, honor them. Oh, thank you for sharing this with me. I know that took a lot of courage, and I don't take that lightly that you would come and talk to me about all of this. I think you're amazing. I do want to be honest with you, though, and I do believe in a traditional interpretation of the Bible, and I don't think that this is Jesus' best for you, but I know that he loves you, and I love you, and my only goal as a follower of Jesus is to love you the way he does. And so I'm not going anywhere. Nothing's going to change in our relationship because I love you. I'm here. I want to be a safe place. And then I'm going to go back to empathy because I've just shared a little bit of a hard truth. Now I need some empathy to help bring some more connection. The coming out process can be a really painful process sometimes. People lose a lot of friends in that space, sometimes even family members. So I'll come back around to, hey, I know sometimes coming out can be really, really painful, and people don't always respond well to that. How has that been for you? And listen, and then share, communicate care and kindness in that space. I'm really sorry that people have responded that way. That's not the heart of Jesus for you. Jesus loves you. He wants a relationship with you just as much as I do. Come back to empathy. All right, we're gonna zip through a couple of practical things for walking with others. So this is people who, they're wanting help, they're wanting resources. How do we do that? And I have this information on that paper as well. So first one, pray for and with them often. Prayer is a powerful thing. We need it, and we need lots of it. Be ready and willing to engage with the uncomfortable conversations. If you can't hear words like porn or masturbation or sex without twitching a little bit, maybe spend some time saying those words to yourself in a mirror until you stop flinching, and you'll be able to check your face at the same time. So it's a helpful thing there. You're going to have some hard conversations and engage some things that might be uncomfortable. My spiritual mom is a great example of this. She is a prim and proper Southern woman who cannot say the word armpit. Fart is the other F word in their house, right? We don't say these things around her. But she will sit down with you and have a full-on conversation. How are you doing with your sexuality? How are you stewarding your purity? When was the last time you masturbated? What's going on in your life? How can I support you? And I'm like, who is this woman? She can't say any of this stuff, but we can have this conversation. It's a mystery to me, but it's a good thing. So be ready and willing for uncomfortable conversations. They're good things. Provide space for them to process without fear or the need to filter their thoughts. This is a big one. We filter out all the things because if you know everything, you're going to reject me. But as Ken Williams says, in order to experience unconditional love, you have to first share your condition. Otherwise, we disqualify everything you're doing and saying. If you actually knew what was going on, you wouldn't love me. You wouldn't be saying these things. So we need to know what's really going on. And a question I ask sometimes is, what's the unfiltered version of that? What's your unfiltered fear, unfiltered struggle, common thought, feeling? What's really going on? That'll give you a lot of insight too. I was meeting with a guy and asked that question because something was going on. And his response was, I think God is actually really cruel. I think he's set me up for failure. And I was like, that's good information to know because I can engage with that. We can start to work through that one. But what's the unfiltered version? Unfiltered belief about themselves, about God, about their situation gives us lots of information. Remind them of the truth when they need it. Sometimes we just need a quick reminder of who God is going to be and what's really happening in our lives. We can be dramatic. Sometimes we need a dose of reality. Come in with some truth when we need it. Remind us of that gently. Help them discover their identity. Who does Jesus say they are? Who do you see when you look at them? And why is that valuable? Why is their identity valuable? Why is it actually a good thing that they are the way that they are? We need that kind of encouragement. Help them address their offenses against men or women and encourage them or encourage their own unique expression of masculinity or femininity. We got to deal with the offenses. I had lots of judgments against masculinity that I had to get rid of in order to actually embrace my own masculinity because I had rejected masculinity so significantly. So you have to deal with those offenses and judgments. And we need to know how our identity is connected to our masculinity or femininity and why that's valuable. There's a whole lot to this story that I don't have time to tell you, but Jesus took me through a process of connecting my identity with my masculinity. And several of the things that I thought this is what makes me gay, he said are actually things that made me Caleb, who's male. And it's a good thing. And what I've learned in that process is my gentler approach to masculinity disarms people really quickly. People come in and they start sharing all of their deepest, darkest secrets and wounds with me in a matter of minutes. And it's because I'm not a scary guy. And before anybody realizes it, the wounds that they got from other men, the Lord starts to heal because I'm able to engage as a man in that space. But they wouldn't walk through the door of someone like my dad, who's a great man, but is a stereotypical man. He's too scary. I'm not scary. I can be if you mess with my people. But that's about the only time you'll see me being a scary person. Fun stories on that front. But we need to know, what is my expression of masculinity or femininity, and why is that valuable? Why does that hold value? Why is that needed just as much as the stereotypical expression? Help them figure that out. Encourage them to build healthy friendships with 3 to 5 people of the same sex. Encourage them to participate in guys' nights or girls' nights. This one helps prevent against codependency and emotional dependency. When I have 3 to 5 guys that I'm sharing everything with, and they're all showing up for me in the way that they do, it's really hard for me to latch on to just one of them because I'm getting my needs met from several people. That's the value of community. Several people can engage with my journey, and each one brings something different in the way they approach what I'm sharing with them. And go with them to the guys' night or the girls' night. Ken mentioned it last night when we were talking with some of the leaders. Going to those things feels like being sent to your death if you're navigating our experience. I'm going to die if I have to be in a room full of all men. I don't feel that way anymore. But it's because I had other men who walked with me and brought me into those spaces and helped provide some of that safety in that context. Help them learn how to regularly cultivate their relationship with Jesus. Help them create some healthy habits and disciplines, spiritual, physical, emotional. I found when I was being intentional with physical discipline, I was more emotionally regulated, and I was more likely to engage with spiritual disciplines that I needed in my life. Help them build some healthy habits in that space. Help them understand their attractions. Why are they attracted to that person? What does that person represent or offer to them? Help them learn to identify their needs and how to healthfully meet them. This was a game changer for me. And again, I don't have time to go into this, but the Lord challenged me to actually write out everything I found attractive about men. And when I did, I suddenly realized everything on this list was an aspect of masculinity that had wounded me, offended me, or I felt disqualified from. And all of a sudden I realized my attractions have far more to do with a deeper wound and need, and not a sexual experience that I'm looking for. So I started to ask the Lord, anytime I noticed an attractive guy, instead of my God, help, forgive me, it was, God, what does he represent? What is it about this guy? What need in my mind could he meet? What I found for me personally, and it changes for everybody, but the majority of my attractions were rooted in a need for security and safety. I didn't have enough of that in my life, and I needed that. He represented security and safety. So God, why am I feeling insecure or like I need safety today? What's going on? Well, there was this conversation today where somebody said this, and you actually are feeling insecure about that. Or, hey, remember when you were 5 and this thing happened? We need to deal with that. We need to engage with some inner healing in that space. But help them learn to understand their attractions. What does it mean? What are these about? Engage with inner healing. What is Jesus addressing in their life? And how do we partner with what he's doing? We all need an inner healing model that we're using in our churches while we're walking with people. If you don't have one, I highly recommend Nothing Hidden Ministries. They have a model called Spirit Connection that is a great and practical model that you can do on yourself all the time. And that's what I did to get a bunch of freedom. But we need an inner healing approach to walking with people in our churches. Okay. Help them set healthy boundaries in their own life. Sometimes we're terrible at that. We need some help. But is this helpful? Is watching this show actually helping or hurting me? What's the fruit of me watching that? Is this person in my life helpful or hurtful? What do I need to do about that? Help them set some boundaries. Help them create a plan for stewarding their journey during everyday life and anytime they travel, especially going home. Going home can be the most dangerous thing because we come into familiar environments, painful family dynamics, even the temptations there start to get a little heavier. So how do we do that well when we're traveling? How do we manage that well? But the main thing I want you to remember from all of this is that Jesus is going to help you do this well, and you already have everything you need to do that well and to be successful because you have him. Again, the people who walked with most of us had no idea what they were doing because it wasn't their experience, but they had Jesus, and that shifted things dramatically. Your genuine care and willingness to be present in a person's life can change everything. That was the story for my life, people who are willing to just show up. And then the last thing I'll just say is there's so much hope with Jesus. He really is who he says he is. He really does what he says he'll do. And there's so much hope for people who are on this journey. So bless you guys as you walk with all the people that the Lord is about to send you because you accidentally signed up for being part of the solution. So thanks for being a part of the solution.